All right, there, everybody. We are back, and we are going to be discussing the final part of the Srivijaya, which would be their culture and government. So here we go. Okay, so on the right there, you see a ruin of a Srivijaya city, and we think they had a king. Maybe, I don't know. It seems like the capital was run directly by the ruler, who might be a king. Honestly, we don't know. And then the outside areas seem to be run by datus or tribal chiefs. Seems like there was a lot of different government officials. What we're really sure of is, though, that the empire was divided into kind of like three zones. So there was an area centered on the capital, of Palembang. Okay, that's like zone one. Then zone two would be estuary cities. So cities that were either on the coast or on rivers and stuff that could be used for trade, whether that was on the island or outside the island. And then the third area were the hinterlands, which were rural areas, and that's where they would get their agricultural goods from. So you lived in one of those three areas, and they were run by government officials. As it expanded off the island, it seemed that you had a federation of kingdoms that served as vassals to the king of Srivijaya. So a feudal type thing, sending tribute, sending taxes, stuff like that. And they control this through the military, and we do believe we have some evidence there and records that point to arranging alliances through dynastic marriage. Shipbuilding was definitely like the big deal for them because, they're really, really good at it. And this seems to be a picture of what their ships looked like. They, obviously, as I mentioned with trade, they basically travel everywhere. Their ships were known as some of the swiftest on the sea, and they had tons of them from what the records show. Which made sense, and that we know that they specifically had not only trade ships, but a navy, okay, because they knew they had to keep a monopoly on those trade routes and on the goods that they sold, particularly one nutmeg, which I'll talk about later, but the ships were going to be the key. Okay, and so it is all about trade. We have unearthed silver and gold coins. On the left, you see that map that I'm going to use like 4,000 times of the sea routes in the Indian Ocean. We will talk about that deeper later, but there's your thing that so you know where they went. The biggest thing and what made them so rich is they controlled the sea access from the stuff from China, and everybody wanted the stuff from China, particularly the silk, the paper, the gunpowder. Everybody wants that stuff from China, and you had to go through Srivijaya to get it. We also know that they expanded all the way out with Arabia, and it seems like they actually have a really big relationship with Arabia. The Arabs will reference them quite a bit. The king of Srivijaya was known as one of the four great kings of the world in the Arabic world, so that gives you an idea of how important they must have been, and was said to have incredible wealth in gold and silver and a huge military, thousands of elephants. And for the most part, it seemed like they were kind of the area where goods would be collected and traded and then just shipped everywhere. So what were the goods? I'm not going to read all of these. This, you can look at it, you can pause it, you can see what's there. One of the real key things there that you see on the left is nutmeg. That is going to be a really, really big one, which you will see, which will be crucial to the rise of power of their successors, Majapahit. But they transferred everything. So what do we know about their culture? Well, we know they liked art, lots of art and sculpture in particular. We do see a big influence on Buddhism on this stuff, as well as from the Gupta Empire. So if you look at the way that they're structured now, the Guptas were gone by the time that this empire rose up, but that doesn't mean that the Indian influence wasn't still out here. And we've kind of talked about that before, and we'll talk about it again with the Sukhothai as well. But we know the Indian empires were out here, so they had a lot of influence. We've seen lots of jewelry as well. And the other thing about their culture, it seems like they had a very highly stratified society. Kings at the top, then military, traders, and everybody else. Doesn't seem like there was much chance for social mobility. Buddhism was the end-all and be-all here. Buddhism is spread by these guys throughout the region. Srivijaya, Buddhism was absolutely central to them. They made extended efforts when they expanded to bring in Buddhist monks and missionaries. And we're talking about they would, it didn't really work in areas in, say, Arabia or Africa that they got to, but they certainly tried. It doesn't seem that they build as much. Like the most famous Buddhist temple in the area is Borobudur, but that wasn't built by them. A lot of people think it was built by them, and I'll show you some pictures of it either in this one or I think a different presentation, but it might be on this one. But they just don't build as much. They're more about spreading the word. Now, yes, there is Borobudur. Now, this was built by a different group, Salyendra. But this is one of the largest Buddhist temples in the world. It's got the stupas that are kind of from India, but again, this kind of Southeast Asian flair with the stone. The big thing here is monasticism. All right, so monasticism, or basic definition, okay, the concept is that it is important for dedicated monks and nuns to study and spread the religion. And this is crucial because Buddhism has no real structure or hierarchy, so you need this. You have male monks who are known as the bhikkhu, and the women monks who you see a picture there on the right, the bhikkhuni. Okay, and it is customary for these particular monks to shave their head. And again, this is probably the biggest legacy of Srivijaya that still basically is around. The role of the monks is to preserve the doctrine and discipline of Buddhism. And they serve as a living example of what you are supposed to be for lay people. All right. They live a fairly austere life, okay? Very simple. And basically, the role of the community was to support the monasteries where the monks lived. Meditation was crucial. You can still be in contact for the monks with your family, but you spent most of the day meditating, and actually you could be ordained. Now, it wasn't necessarily as much of a requirement, although it was kind of like customary, and you'll see this a lot when I talk about the Sukhothai, or the beginning of Thailand. Children as young as ages from 7 to 10 can be ordained, and they can learn the ways of the monks, as you see these children here. And then when they turn 20, they can take a formal vow and then become monks. But at some point, they can renounce their vows, and it's okay, and then you can leave the monastery. So everybody has some type of level of involvement with Buddhism, and even today, a lot of Buddhists that still live in Indonesia. Islam is the main religion there, no doubt, but the Buddhists are still very, very dedicated. And this really was the center of Buddhism. It is super, super important. Monks basically were running everything and they were some of the most educated people, but it was really known that if you were going to eventually, if you wanted to do a Buddhist pilgrimage, if you were in Asia and you wanted to do a Buddhist pilgrimage to India, you kind of were expected to go to Indonesia first and Srivijaya to really meet with the monks and get a deeper education before going over to India. We know they also teach Sanskrit and, with some of the ancient dialects and Pali and stuff like that, so that they feel that they are closer to the actual words of the Buddha. They would get tons of visitors, and let me just give you a quote to give you an idea of what it was like here. Here's a quote from a missionary. Many kings and chieftains in the islands of the Southern Ocean admire and believe, and their hearts are set on accumulating good actions. In the fortified city of Boga, which is the Chinese name for Palembang, Buddhist priests number more than 1,000, whose minds are bent on learning and good practices. They investigate and study all the subjects that exist, just as the Middle Kingdom, again, this is a Chinese missionary. The rules and ceremonies are not at all different. If a Chinese priest wishes to go to the West in order to hear lectures and read, he had better stay here 1 or 2 years and practice the proper rules, then proceed to Central India. So there you go. They do practice Vajrayana Buddhism, which was very similar to Tibetan Buddhism, but today Theravada is the dominant one. And their influence is really going to be on Thailand, which I will be talking about again as well, is that it is really very common for almost everyone to be ordained, again, for a short time as a monk or a nun. Okay, and you see a little ancient Srivijaya Buddhist temple there. So it's absolutely crucial. So that, in the end, I think is really the big influence, because Thailand and Myanmar or Burma today, these are two of your big central areas in Southeast Asia in Buddhism. But the reason the Buddhism got there is because of the people of Srivijaya. So again, new empire. Hopefully you guys liked it, and I will see everybody soon.